Hi everyone, welcome to my lecture on human physiology. Today I'm going to talk about the renal physiology. The renal system comprises of the kidney and two ureters, and then lead to bladder, and then from bladder that's the urethra and lead to out of the body. So the function of the kidneys, the first to regulate the water in organic ion balance and also acid-base balance. It removes most of the metabolic waste products produced in the body from the blood and excreted in the urine. Removal of any foreign chemicals, either ingest in food or we take as a medicine, also from the blood to the urine. And in some extreme cases like fasting, the body will generate glucose from other sources, from amino acid mostly. And the liver is by far the most common places, most important places to do gluconeogenesis. And kidney in fasting situation can do some of its part. And the last, the kidney can also produce and secrete several kinds of hormones and enzymes. That's erythropoietin, the one that stimulates red blood cell, erythrocyte production and maturation. And the other one called renin is an enzyme. And also vitamin D3, that's 1,25-dihydroxy vitamin. Let's take a closer look. That's the most important organ in the renal system, of course, are the kidneys. We human beings, we have two kidneys located on the back of our abdomen, one on each side. They are enclosed in a thick layer of capsule. And if you cut the cross-section, there's a part we call the cortex that's closer to the outer surface, and then the inner part called the medulla. And by naked eye, you won't see much, but the early anatomists, even before microscope was invented, they used a magnifying lens, can see there are many thin thread-like tubes. And then they will find a lot of them in the cortex region, and also in the medulla region, there are lots of blood vessels and tubes there. The cortex medulla, they form a structure called the papilla. Papilla look like a finger, that protrusion from medulla into the cortex. And in the center part is a cavity, calyces and the pelvis. And from the pelvis and lead to the ureter that lead outside of the kidney. Of course, at the pelvic region, there are also renal arteries get into the kidney and also renal veins that lead out of the kidney. So that's the gross anatomy we can see from a cross section of kidney. But the real structure, only after the microscope was invented, then we can really know what's composed of the kidney. The basic unit within the kidney is called a nephron. Nephron is composed of many different sections, different structures. One nephron is one unit composed of blood vessels, renal tubules. And each kidney comprises about 1 million nephrons. 1 million, not a small number, packed in kidneys. Kidneys not really that big either. So you can see that's also the power of miniaturization. And the nephron is composed of two parts. One is we call the renal corpuscle, mostly composed of the capillaries, blood vessels, with the afferent arterial, efferent arterial. In between, we call the glomerulus, glomerular capillary. They branched many times and form a ball of thread. Also, there's another structure. It's at the blind end of the renal tubule, enclose the glomerulus with inside. And this we use the discoverer's name called Bowman. William Bowman is a late 19th century, early 20th century British anatomist. He discovered that, so we call it Bowman's capsule. So Bowman's capsule and the glomerulus, and with the afferent and efferent arteriole that comprises the glomerulus, or called the renal corpuscle. And the other part is the renal tubule. Renal tubule is the extension of the Bowman capsule. There are many segments. We have proximal tubules, and proximal tubules can be divided into convoluted part and this and straight part. And then from the proximal tubule, the tubule will go down and form a loop. Some of the loop is very long, all the way into the medulla. So this loop was discovered by a German anatomist, Henle. So we call it the loop of Henle. They have descending and ascending part. And then the tubule will go back to the renal corpuscle region and form another distal convoluted tubules. And then from there, several distal convoluted tubules with other nephron, they will join together and to form collecting duct. The collecting duct formed in the cortical region, so we have cortical collecting ducts, and they go down all the way to medulla and becomes medullary collecting duct. And then they will empty into the renal pelvis, and then the filtrate, then we call the urine, will go down through the ureter and be excreted out of the kidney. There are two sets of arterioles and also capillaries. And arterioles, they are afferent that get into the glomerulus or renal corpuscle from the glomerulus. And the one that lead out of the renal corpuscle, that's the efferent arteriole. And then there are also two sets of capillaries. One is the one that form the glomerulus, and the other is the capillary that surround the renal tubule. Outside the renal tubule, they have many capillary. This capillary is also the extension from the efferent arteriole. Then they form another capillary bed and surround the renal tubules. So that we call peritubular capillaries. And then the nephron also can be divided into two different kinds. One is more on the upper part of the cortex, we call the cortical nephron. And the other is closer to the medulla region, it's more deeper, called the juxtamedullary nephron. And it's the juxtamedullary nephron. They have very long loop of Henle, and the loop Henle descending part go down deep into the medulla. And also surrounding the loop of Henle, they have another peritubular system, goes down and up, parallel to the loop of Henle. And this capillary, we have another name called the vasa recta. Recta means straight, so more or less like straight capillaries.